Hello, it's Ryan Hooper here, and welcome to another episode in the series Stories from the Pack from Wolves Fancast. On this series, if you're not familiar with the series so far, what we do really is it's an opportunity to really take a trip down memory lane, and each episode we're joined by a guest who shares their own experiences of following the Wolves. On this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by the assistant editor of Mirror Football and Mirror Sport. That is Alex Richards. Alex, how are you doing?
Not too bad, mate. How are you? How's yourself?
Really good. Thank you. Thanks so much for coming on board with us. I mentioned sort of before we sort of set this up that at this time of recording, football's on pause on a Premier League level for yourself. So, how have you kind of found your job? In this process, are you working from home, or is that something you've done generally anyway? Or
No, it's been working from home. It's been very different, shall we say? Because I'm usually office based 95% of the time. But for the last 3 weeks, pretty much 3 weeks, 3 months, I should say, 12 weeks, 13 weeks now, based at home, and it's been a challenge because you're working in a team and you're working with. We've got reporters out in the field, but then we've got the guys in the office, and we're in like a central hub that we're dealing with the news guys and we're dealing with ourselves and the reporters out in the field. As I say, it becomes very difficult when we are all then separate, and we're having to chat on Zoom if we need to have like a meeting, or we're just talking on GChat or Slack during the day when things are breaking and we need to get something and get on it immediately. It's very difficult. And as I say, it's been a challenge, but I think we've done all right with it. As well as I would have expected when it was said that we were all going to have to go our separate ways, kind of thing.
I guess that's the thing with your industry, then, isn't it? Really, I would imagine, as you say, when there's a breaking story, it would be literally a case of running over, tapping on the shoulder, and going, "We've got something. We need to kind of act on it now." And then I guess does the process change where you may have to get clearance, and then you're trying to get in touch with people, and I guess that poses its challenges as well.
Yeah, it just makes it all that little bit more difficult and makes it that little bit longer. As you say before, if it was something that you need to collaborate with the news desk, you run over and you can have a chat and tap someone on the shoulder and be like this is happening. We need to quickly. What can we do? Where do we stand? But doing it, somebody is working at home. They might be literally as stupid as they're in the kitchen making themselves a cup of tea. So that's like 2-3 minutes, which it doesn't sound like anything, but at that moment when you are urgently wanting to do something, it's just one of those little things that it all just becomes. They all add up at the end of the day, and it just becomes that little bit more tricky, shall we say? But as I say, it's been difficult for everybody in every industry, and it's something that everybody has had to adapt to.
It's funny, isn't it? It's kind of that call. It's like I log in at certain times with my day job, so I'm working from home as well. And then the boss has rung me a couple of times, and both times I've not been near the phone. And I'm getting like really paranoid about it now. I'm like, I'm not taking the piss. I am logged in. I'm literally, if I would be in the office, then I might, And then it's kind of like, when you just kind of talk yourself into something, it's like, yeah, it's really weird to kind of try and justify what you're doing without the eyes on you. But yeah, it's like you say, we're all coping, we're all adjusting. But that's the current day. If you want to follow Alex on Twitter, I would really recommend it in terms of from a Wolves perspective and nationally as well. And I know there's a lot that Alex covers. You can do so at AA_Richards as well. But when the podcast comes out, which you'll be listening to now, we'll obviously tag Alex in as well. So that's the current day. The premise of the series is very much sort of down memory lane, and we may circle back to how things are now with Wolves. And why not? Because we know how good things are right now. But for yourself, Alex, what was your first memories of following Wolves? When did your Wolves story begin?
So I've had to check this with my dad because I've been racking my brains to think of my first game, and he thinks he's got it nailed to the opening day of the 93-94 season. Bristol City at home, and they won 3-1. And I was 5 years old, and I've had a quick Wikipedia and a quick quick check of the score and any reports I can find from that day. They won 3-1. Steve Bull scored twice. I cannot remember a thing from this game.
Yeah.
But my dad is insistent that I marched up and down the stairs behind him because he sits on the end of a row in the North Bank.
Mm-hmm.
He's insistent that I spent my day marching up and down, playing imaginary drums while fans chanted and playing in tune with the fan chants. And that was my day. That was all I did. I watched the game, he says, for probably, some of the first half, came back to him at half time, bits of the second. But for the majority, I was more fascinated in the crowd noise and playing my imaginary drum kit.
That's brilliant. I think that's the thing. No, it's. I do this and I ask people about their first game, but I have to say first memory because I can't nail down my first game. I can't. I can think that maybe a game, and it might have been in the first five, for example, that I remember, which was like Oxford. I remember the old John Island sitting there, and as I say, it's more about the going to the ground, isn't it? Really. So, sort of obviously at an early age there, what was you sort of perhaps not for that game, but sort of as you went to go to the games, what were your first impressions of Molineux, and was there any? Did you sit in the North Bank often with your dad, or did that change?
No, it was always the North Bank. It was always driving in, parking in like the Civic Centre, then walking under the subway, and then just as you walk under the subway and you get the noise of just everybody chatting as they're on the game, and the noise just getting progressively louder as you got close to the ground, and then just as you come out the subway, that big stand right there in front of you, and just the colours. You got the smells, of course, of Mr. Sizzle and whatnot as well, but just the colours of people and people selling badges. A load of Bull was being sold at the time. The official Wolves magazine programs, I should say, were getting sold outside the ground as well. And then you've just got all the colours, and when you walk into the ground and the old gold seats and all the different old shirts, the newer shirts at the time, that was my takeaway from it, and just the noise. I can't remember that much of those early days of the actual football, but the noise and all that's the bit that always stuck with me.
And I think this is it really, and it's good to hear that, because I think that resonates, because I think that's for a lot of people. It's not always about how we played on that particular day. It's just going. I remember going with my dad. I remember going to the pub beforehand, like you say, the walk to the ground, and it was like, wow, okay, I quite like this. I like a little bit of this, because this is a different world, and one which I didn't think I'd be part of. And I think we're obviously biased in terms of the podcast here, but you mentioned sort of the seats and so forth, and I guess someone like yourself who covers football, on a general scale, there is something about Molineux, isn't there, that it has that identity and it has that ground and it has that look about it, and there's many other grounds which are similar with their own identity, but there are also grounds which are kind of pop-up micro stadiums where you can kind of change the colour and you can be in one to the other. So it's that Molineux factor. There's something about Molineux as a ground, isn't there? I think.
Yeah, certainly. I think it's that city centre location. I think that really does add to it, being in and around, because you know yourself when you go to away games and the ground is in kind of the middle of nowhere, and you're a bit out of the city centre or wherever, and there's nowhere really to go for a drink round. I always think Coventry, Highfield Road used to be one of my favourites, going through the streets and the housing to get there. But the Ricoh Arena, a couple of times I've been there, I've just it's pretty soulless, and I don't mean to be disparaging to Coventry fans, but I just don't really like it. And I think the great thing about Molineux is that it is in that city centre. You can go before games around wherever you want to go, and you can all walk together, and it means that the sounds and the sights come before you actually get into the ground. They follow you there, and I think that's something that's really great about it. And I think that for all the talk of Wolves keep on, they want to expand Molineux and they want to make it bigger rather than moving to a new stadium out of the way. That's the big thing that I think you don't want to lose, that, because it is the feeling of fans get coming out of the pub, going to the ground, being as one before they've even got in a seat.
Yeah, and I think this is it. And I think the point you make in terms of, there are stadiums that you go to, and it's kind of like you're out of it, and then it's there. But there's a presence, and I think Coventry fans would agree with you, to be honest, in terms of their recollections of Highfield Road, and Man City would have become an amazing force. But one of the first games I went to was Main Road, and that I loved that because it was sort of Moss Side. It was the cobbled, the streets, the northern streets, and it kind of felt like part of it. So no, that really kind of I get absolutely where you're coming from. I mean, in terms of those early games, any standout players? I mean, you mentioned Bully, which was kind of goes without saying, scoring probably on your debut. Bully, any others in particular or unsung heroes at that time you looked out for?
I always remember John DeWolf just because
Mm.
he just stood out. He was just an absolute giant of a man. And this would be me being 6, 7, 8 years old, and he just looked huge and imposing, and then he had the long hair as well. Just made him. He just looked like a rock star.
Yeah.
And he really was one of the first that I really thought he's just brilliant. Obviously Steve Bull as well, Andy Thompson. He was one of my dad's favourites, so I'd hear how reliable he was and how good he was, and you could see that he was just a little guy on the pitch, but he didn't shirk a challenge, and he always did his job. And then as it got slightly older, Robbie Keane made his breakthrough, and that was the first time I actually, I was 8, 9, then getting into playing myself really, and he was this young kid that just came out of nowhere and just had this little bit of spark and did these little skills that I hadn't really seen before at that, what was then the second division, first division, championship now at that level. And I thought he was just absolutely brilliant. He really was one that as soon as he broke through it, he just attracted my eye. Whenever he was playing, he was the one that I was watching.
So what point did kind of, I mean, you'll always follow Wolves, but when was the sort of the transition? Do you remember the first time you kind of covered Wolves on a professional level? So when did that kind of come into effect for yourself?
First time I ever went into the press box would have been 5 years ago or so. So it would have been when they were trying to get promoted. At the time, I still had my season ticket, so more often than not, those Saturdays I would get work off, make sure I was off work, and travel. At the early point, I was working in Manchester, so I'd travel down. Later on, it became working in London, so I'd travel up, meet my dad, pre-game, go for a few drinks with him or whatever, and then go to the game with him, just like as always. So that was the first time, really, would have been 5 years ago or so, probably towards the end of Lambert would have been. I know he wasn't there that long, but probably towards the end of Lambert would have been the first time I did it in a professional capacity. And then obviously Nuno coming in and doing it that little bit extra then. And in more recent times doing it more so, which has been absolutely brilliant. Those big nights, the Man United games, the Man City game, working those nights, and it's so good. I mean, that Man City game, the amount of rewrites I did in the middle of it, but I was in the middle of doing rewrites and trying to not celebrate too much, but also just having that little smile and being like, yes, but then, oh shit, I've got to rewrite this now. And I thought I'd got a cracking bit at 2-2, and then Doherty gets a winner, and it's just like, oh, God, good lad, but come on.
That interests me, to be honest, Alex. I like that idea that, like you say, that someone like myself can do it. And yeah, I can talk about it on the podcast, but it's not like I have to put something out there and then. And you kind of think, well, okay, settle down now, lads. That's fine. If you're winning, and then it's like, yeah, it's great, but shit, I've got this narrative and I've got to maybe change it slightly, I suppose. But then that's enjoyable, I guess.
Oh no, it is. It's a great challenge, but it's always that thing. Like obviously online, we do a lot of the 5 talking points from the game and the 5 things we learned. So you might have a couple of those that you've done by half time, and they'll when you're at half time, you'll read through them and you go, yeah, that's nailed on. He had an awful first half. He did this, did that.
Mm-hmm.
He might have an absolute stormer in the second half. Now, if you forget to go back and be like, and add a few caveats and be like, oh, he spin it again. That he really struggled, but he came out on the other side of it. you can look really stupid at the end of the day if you go ahead and it gets published, and then suddenly everyone's turning around to you and going, "Hold on, he might have had a nightmare of the first half, and he scored twice in the second half, and they came out and won." So it's one of those. It's a really good balance in that, but you do have to be careful at times.
It's great though, because I mean, I love it after a game though. It's so subjective, like, you know, that when the ratings come out and stuff like that, and it's just like anything, isn't it? Though, really, it's you know, we can build an opinion, but then it's you just know people are just kind of getting on, going, why is he give Johnny 6? Why is he done that? But you know,
yeah, of course, and it also depends on your rating system as well, because you know, I don't think, I certainly know our newspaper very, very, very rarely gives 10s. You know, I think I've seen probably 2 in the 7.5 years I've worked there. I think one of those was Lionel Messi scoring a Champions League hat trick or a double and setting up 2 more and just running the show. But personal, you know, if you're giving a rating out of 10, your rating, you might start someone's average performance for you. You might give that, oh, okay, that's a 5 mark. Well, someone else's average rating might be a 6 mark. Now, you both think they've had exactly the same game, but you know, it's a different score. So it's always interesting, and I think they're one of those things that people like to know. Well, who played well, who didn't play well, but you do have to take them with a pinch of salt, and at the same time think to yourself, right, I think the words that get said with the ratings are more important than the actual number themselves.
No, absolutely, and it's sort of like you say, sort of, you know, your rationale, isn't it, really, for it? So that's kind of sort of you know, sort of the current, and it's really interesting to know from your perspective. It really does interest me, and I'm sure it'll interest listeners as well, and sort of how those worlds collide. But speaking again, you know, essentially as a fan, but you could have been reporting at the time. What's been your let's go with, we do highs and lows, so we'll end on a positive. So I'll take you back to maybe what's the sort of worst experience you've had following or covering Wolves?
One of my earliest experiences was going to Burnden Park and Bolton.
Right. Yeah.
Not for the playoff game, but for I was 6 at the time. It was a couple of days before my birthday, and it was in that season, and we got absolutely battered 5-1. And it was a horrible day. It was cold. It was miserable. It was one of the few occasions where my mom came to the game with me and my dad, and there was actually a period in the second half. I think we were losing about 4-1 at that point. I actually fell asleep. You know, I was that young and that bored with it, and I hated it that much, and I fell asleep that day. And that sticks out as one of the, you know, real low points of it. In more recent times, I think, you know, the Watford semi-final is always going to be a sore point, but I don't really see it as a low point. You know, it kind of, at the time, it was absolutely horrific, but it's just another point on the journey when I look back at it. There was a Brentford away game when things were starting to unravel under Jacket, and I think they lost 3-0, and that was a bad night. There was a lot of hostile feeling in the away stand that night, and that stands out as being a very poor and difficult evening. So they're the 3 that I can vividly point to and say they were difficult, disappointing, and whatnot. And then of course, you know, losing 5-1 at home to West Brom in that season when that all went wrong as well. That wasn't a great day, and that was the time when, you know, you've got friends and it means more. I always think when you go back to being young and the game is, as we've spoke about, is all about the smells and everything around the game. It's when you get to school age that it becomes about the actual match and the result. And you know, because you've got friends who support rival teams and that, and then you go into school on a Monday and that's what you're discussing. So at that point, that 5-1 game, you know, playing playing football at the time with a lot of lads who were Albion fans, and they really enjoyed rubbing that one in.
Yeah, as they still do, as they still do.
Yeah.
But this is, this is football, and it goes in cycles. I'm with you on like the Watford one. It was really bad because it's a semi final and it was an opportunity. But I think the point you make is really good because there are other lows you described there where you kind of think like the Albion one, where are we going? Whereas with the Watford one, it was like, well, we might be back in a couple of years, and that's not being arrogant, but it kind of just felt like, well, if we're as good as we think we are, or we expect the club to be, and seeing how the club has developed, then we're not going to be strangers to this stage. It wasn't like it was a one hit, if that makes sense.
No, it felt like a speed bump on a journey. I mean, a pretty big speed bump, and one that you look back and okay, potentially it could have derailed the side, but actually the way they finished last season kind of reinvigorated them a little bit, and they really kicked on. You look at Watford on the flip side, and that was their pinnacle. That's been their peak. If you look at what's happened in the months and the year since, that semi-final win was terrific. But then they went and got thrashed in the final. They had a really disappointing start to this season. Manager gets sacked. New manager comes in. He struggles to make any impact. He gets sacked. And then they had to rely on Nigel Pearson, who's done a really good job to stabilise and to keep them in with a fight, shall we say. But that, if you're a Watford fan now, you're looking and going, well, when are we getting to another FA Cup semi-final? When are we going to get to another final? Whereas for us, as you say, it's not being arrogant, but we're looking at our team and thinking, they've got a chance here. They can play with the big boys and they can compete for things.
Yeah, and we know how good things are now, but what about your first sort of moment when you were like, God, I've never felt so either emotionally or vested or so high as a Wolves fan? When was sort of your first moment when you was like, yeah, this is fantastic?
Ooh, I mean, there's a couple of early away games. There was an FA Cup game. I think it was Dave Jones first, played Nottingham Forest away, and Adam Proudlock scored the winner, won 1-0, and that was one of the really first times. I think I would have been 13. That was one of the real first times that I really thought, oh, this is absolutely brilliant. This is terrific. Like I knew I liked football before then, and I liked going to the Wolves, and I really enjoyed it. But that was the first time I thought, oh, yes, this is bloody brilliant. And that was a terrific day. Because it was his first game, and we didn't have a particularly good team then. But it was one of those that was absolutely, remarkable, and the scenes at the end of it were terrific. Before then, the FA Cup semi-final against Arsenal. That was a good day. The result was dreadful, and we all have our feelings about the team that was selected that day. But that was another one where a couple of years before that, and you didn't pay so much attention to the result, but that was going to Villa Park, and it being that bit different because it wasn't Molineux, and it was a semi-final, and it was neutral venues, which were just felt so weird. And that was great. But the Jones era was one really getting into it and really falling in love with the actual support and the way things went. There was another game against Forest. It was a home game, a midweek one, and I love football under the lights, night games. That's just brilliant for me. I'm give me a night game over a noon kickoff any day of the week. I don't think I'm the only one that thinks of that, but they are just the one. And there was a home game against Forest, 0-0, I think. And I think Sean Newton scored a winner. And I remember the crowd going absolutely crazy that night. And it was one of the first times I'd ever seen. I think it might have kept us top of the league or put us top of the league. And I just remember looking around and the crowd everywhere going ballistic. That was the first time I actually remember seeing the crowd around me and just being like, oh my God, there are 28 lunatics jumping everywhere, and it's so good. I'm just going to jump with them. And that really was one of the times when I thought, yes, that's it. That season under Jones, when he first came and took over, they had a couple of months, and then they spent a decent amount of money. Ultimately, the season ended in, shouldn't say tragedy because that's too strong a word, but Albion clawing back that amount of points and getting promoted instead. But that was the season that really, my love of just Wolves and being a fan and everything it meant, that was the one that really took hold.
What about obviously following that Cardiff? Did you go to Cardiff for the playoff final?
Millennium Stadium, yeah. My what's it of that is just standing on a chair for the entire 90 minutes. Because when I was that age, I was quite short, and because no one was sitting down anywhere, so it was just standing on a chair for 90 minutes. And the first 45 were unbelievable, but at the same time, everyone tells this story and everyone says it. You still thought, oh God, let's not have this go wrong now.
Yeah,
because that's just not. And I don't think they came out second half, and I don't think you ever felt secure until possibly after the penalty save. I think that was the first point you thought, oh my God, we are actually going to do it and get promoted now, because you just had in the back of your mind constantly, oh, I've seen teams get promoted before, and I've seen better teams lose to lesser teams, but I've never seen anyone lose a 3-goal lead. So please don't let it happen to us.
And I think it's probably ties into the experience you talked about there with the previous season and kind of the heartaches before. And I don't know about you, but it's took me a while to kind of get over a lot of that. Now, in the current day, when we do go goal behind, there's always still in the back of my mind to say, this is Wolves, and there's going to be a reason we're not going to do it. But I think I've finally come to the point where I'm really comfortable watching this team, because if they do go a goal behind, invariably they're within the game. But I think at that time, unless you got a 5 or 6 goal lead, because of what we'd seen prior, there was that feeling like, is it for real? Is it really going to happen?
Yeah, and I think it just extends to the kind of football that we see them play now. They play with such control and kind of an arrogance that, yes, we do belong at this level and we'll play our game no matter who we're playing against. Whenever we've seen Wolves get promoted before and go up, it's always been that you come across teams and you're in the Premier League and you think, oh, it's going to be difficult today. Remember that season under Jones, we had a really good team in the Championship that didn't get promoted, and then they improved it with Ince and Irwin, and Miller stayed, and they were really good, and they got promoted. And then you went into the Premier League and you thought, go on, we can be a decent Premier League team. And then they got battered 5-1 at Blackburn on the opening day. They lost, I think, was it 4-0 in the first home game? Might have been Charlton.
Charlton was the first one. Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And at that point, I remember then being on holiday, and we were playing Man U in the midweek, and bookmakers were pricing up would we concede 10. And that was just one of those things that every time, we had the McCarthy years when we went up, and you always thought, right, let's just we aspired to be a mid-table team. Now we aspire to be far, far higher. And so, as you say, you kind of lose that feeling of dread, because now we think, we're a good team now. There's nothing else to say about it. We are a good team now, and so you don't dread it. Whereas, as you say, it takes a little while for those kind of bumps that you hit to wear off.
Brilliant. And I suppose that's sort of cliches in terms of really being a roller coaster, but it is, Wolves is a football club, and many other clubs will have their own different stories. But when you've seen the relegations and the promotions, and going back to the 80s, sort of, and so forth. I mean, what is it? I know it's a difficult thing to sum up, but what are your feelings? The title of this series is sort of, stories from the pack and being part of the pack. How do you feel as a Wolves fan in terms of what that means, and does that tie into how you feel about the city as well, and the location, and now you cover sort of the, as a national group paper. Do you feel like a guardian of the city, if that makes sense? And how, are you protective over it?
No, not really. Not really. I mean, so I'm Bradley Hill in Stourbridge originally, so I was always in that mixed zone of, a lot of kids I knew were Villa fans, a lot were Albion fans. Not many were Blues fans, and I can understand that. And so when I was growing up at school, then I was definitely like, I'm Wolves. It was me, there was a couple of my mates who were Wolves fans, and we would, defend Wolves to the ends of the earth. Even when that bloody Albion season happened and they come and they turn around and overtake it, you're still defending your team, blindly. Oh, well, you are getting promoted and you have overtaken us by 12 points, but we've still got a better team. That sort of gibberish. But now I very much, I see it as, this is my team and these are my fans. I don't think it needs me to turn and to say like, oh, how great Wolves are. Or this. I think people from outside can see how good this team is now and how much the club is building. But there's always going to be questions about, owners' intentions and, the Mendes relationship and all that sort of stuff. But it's one of those things that, because you're a Wolves fan, you will see that. Other clubs have it now. We're all seeing with Newcastle now all the scrutiny over their potential owners, Man City's owners. Every club has scrutiny to some degree, and I think Wolves generally in the wider scope of things, very well respected and very well liked right now. And I think that's because of what people see coming from the football pitch. And whenever you hear about Wolves at the moment, you always hear about how good the fans are in those big games and how much they get the team, the noise that gets generated through the TV for other fans to hear. And I think that's something that Wolves fans should really be proud of at the moment.
No, absolutely. And as you say, in terms of the team, you touched on it just as we come to the close here. At time of recording, we're on pause, aren't we? Effectively, of football, and football may have started when this goes out, but we'll certainly still be way off the season when that does conclude. Where do you see Wolves finishing? I know it's a difficult question because one of the things I think about there is, oh well, actually, do we lose a little bit because we haven't got that home support as well, and do we lose that momentum? And what are your thoughts in terms of where you not expect, because that's one thing, but where you think Wolves may finish?
It's a whole new ball game for everybody, isn't it? Pardon the cliche, but this break that they've all had. Some teams will have used this break and it'll reinvigorate them. Players will find freshness and whatnot. Other teams, it came at really a horrific time and just kind of stalled them. You've got to hope that we will be one of those that, given the long season that we've had, how early it started, how many games have been played, the small squad who have played those games, that it would work to our advantage. I listened to you speak to Johnny Phillips, and he made a great point that, it's kind of robbed us of 3 months with João Moutinho, because at his age, it's difficult to get back into the swing of things. And that may be very true, but you could look at it at the same token that, well, he's had 3 months now to rest and recuperate after having played so many minutes already this season. But it could be exactly what he needs to go and end the season with a flourish. I think it's, as we have touched on it a number of times, we are a good team, and I don't think there's any fear for them. I don't think they should have any fears. They can go. There is this possibility of, a Champions League place being open to a team that finishes fifth. They're very much capable. I wouldn't like to gamble on saying they will finish fifth or anything like that, but they are very much capable, because they're a team that, this is a good season for a team like Wolves, who are very comfortable in their own skin, or a team like Sheffield United, who are similarly, they know what they're about, because you've had Tottenham go through this stage where they've had Pochettino leave and Mourinho come in, and they look like they're caught between a rock and a hard place. They're not really sure of themselves. Arsenal, similar situation. So they're both fallen out. Man United have, Jekyll and Hyde for much of the season, but they seem to have found something with Bruno Fernandes, and they'll have Rashford and Pogba back. So they, in theory, should finish the season well, but you just don't know whether they will or not. So Wolves, very capable again. That fifth place, can they finish in the top four? It's possible. It'd be difficult, but I think, after how long this season has been for them, the amount of games still in Europe, of course, if they finish in that top 7 or 8 again, I think we all just have to applaud it and just say, congratulations, well done. But it would be nice to see, can they finish with a flourish? Can they nick that 5th spot? And then you're looking at UEFA, and do they turn around to Man City and go, sorry lads, not next season? 5th place becomes a Champions League spot.
No, it is exciting. We're getting the buzz for it again, and there's many factors there, as you say, different teams and different dynamics, and it'd be interesting to see sort of how the season unfolds. In the meantime, just before we do close, just in terms of the fan cast, if you can support us and give us all a 5-star review, we really do appreciate it. We're trying to give as much content out to fans as possible. Some of the episodes we've launched, which will be available in the archive, we've recently done the Wolves draft. We've done the alternative Hall of Fame, and we're continuing with this series, Stories from the Pack. Just thank you to Alex. As I mentioned earlier, you can follow Alex on Twitter, @AA_Richards, and I'll keep you updated with developments as well. So, Alex, thank you.
Thank you very much, mate. Been a pleasure.
And from both of us, stay safe, and we'll see you soon.